Hello friends! I decided that I would voice at least part of the text in my own voice, because if I don't do this, then I will never learn to speak English. Why only part of the text? Because for me it is very difficult. Sometimes I simply don't know how to pronounce some words correctly, and because of this it takes a lot of time to voice them. Subtitles are added to each video if my English is not clear to you. Ukraine today announced that Russian counterattacks in two directions, in the Robotyne area and south of Bakhmut in Andriivka and Klishchiivka, where Russia is trying to recapture last position. According to the General Staff Speaker Andriy Kovalyov in the Melitopol sector, the Russian attacks in the area of Mala Tokmachka, Robotyne and Novodanilivka, that is, the carried out flank attacks in the area liberated by the Ukrainian army. It is reported that the Ukrainian army is inflicting significant losses to Russia, exhausting it. Russian telegram channels claim that there are oncoming battles of the western outskirts of the Robotyne. That is, the Russians are trying to advance on the flank of the Ukrainian armed forces, which are making their way to the south. In other areas of the southern front, they say that there are no significant changes. Next, my robot friend will voice the lyrics.
Near Bakhmut, the Ukrainian armed forces continue assault operations and consolidate on the achieved lines, the General Staff reported today. The Russian army is trying to recapture lost positions in the area of the liberated Andriivka. They also launched an assault north of Bakhmut in the area of the settlement of Yevhenii, but all attacks were repulsed, says the General Staff report. At the same time, the Telegram channel of Ukrainian soldiers fighting in the Bakhmut sector reports today that the Russians are counterattacking in Klishchiivka, trying to regain lost positions. According to them, the situation is difficult, but the positions are being held. Meanwhile, Russian military telegram channels confirm Russian counterattacks on the southern flank in Klishchiivka and Andriivka. They consider both settlements to be in the gray zone. In general, after the announcement of the liberation of these villages by the Ukrainian armed forces, there was no deep breakthrough in the Russian defense. The Russians did not retreat further to the east, but brought up reserves and are trying to regain control over the positions. This suggests that the advance of Ukrainian troops continues to be slow, which is already becoming the subject of consideration in the Western press on a daily basis. Thus, the New York Times writes that Ukraine and its allies, including the United States, may have placed too high hopes on a counteroffensive by the Ukrainian army. Ukraine is fighting one of the strongest armies in the world. If Ukraine manages to force Russia to retreat significantly, it will most likely take years, not months, the article said, analyzing the counteroffensive. Ukraine's current achievements, which include the liberation of several villages, are aimed at achieving a big breakthrough, although it may never happen. At the same time is running out. In the fall it will rain, the terrain will become dirtier and more difficult to pass, which will likely prevent major successes on the battlefield. Meanwhile, Russian troops have stepped up attacks in the northeast, hoping to recapture some of the territory it lost last year and force Ukraine to move its troops to the northeast. If enough Ukrainian forces are transferred from the southeastern front, the last major counteroffensive may fail, the article says. Meanwhile, a long war of attrition, and this is the stage the conflict is apparently moving into, poses a very painful question for Ukraine of reserves to make up for losses. The scale of these losses was recently revealed by the head of the Poltava Regional Territorial Recruitment Center, Vitaly Berezny. Speaking to the city council, he said that out of every 100 people mobilized last fall, only 10 to 20 remained, the rest being dead, wounded, and incapacitated. These are losses of 80 to 90%. In fact, these are true figures for our unit, including. Some have even fewer left in service, commented sniper Konstantin Pershinsky fighting near Bakhmut with the call sign Grandfather. Also noteworthy is another figure voiced by Berezny, the failure to implement the General Staff's mobilization plan. According to Berezny, in Poltava the plan was completed by only 13%, and this is the worst indicator in the region. In fact, this is natural. In a large city, it is easier to hide from mobilization than in a village or small town. At the same time, Ukraine is intensifying mobilization because Russia is increasing the personnel of its forces, said Roman Kostenko, Secretary of the Parliamentary Defense Committee. According to him, Ukraine will have to carry out mobilization more intense than now if Russia, as the Ukrainian General Staff previously reported, calls up another 700,000 recruits. Now we are mobilizing, reacting to what forces and means the Russians have. For example, they have approximately 400,000 military personnel. Therefore, we are responding to mobilization, replenishing our units at the forefront, forming new ones. Of course, if mobilization in Russia will proceed at such a pace, we will need to increase mobilization in order to be able to respond adequately, he said. According to Kostenko, the armed forces of Ukraine are 80% or even more mobilized, who were not previously professional military personnel. Western media are also talking about high losses. Mood in Ukraine is worsening due to high casualties and the prospects of a protracted war, writes The Telegraph. One Ukrainian military officer spoke off the record about the losses his company suffered during an attack through minefields. Those who replaced the fallen lack training and motivation, he said. And if the war drags on for another 1 or 2 years, the strain on Ukraine's limited human resources could become enormous, the publication reports the officer's words. Perhaps the biggest difference from 2022 is that so many people have died now, MP Dmitry Nataluka told the publication. Every second person now knows someone who died in battle. I have lost count of my friends who died, the deputy added. Military medic Elena Mykolova said that after such losses there will never be a victory for her, since the people we lost will not be with us. According to her, while in the Kupiansk direction, for the first time in her life she was ready to talk to any people in order for her battalion to survive. This is a sad reality. The victory that I so longed for will never happen. We will have no one to celebrate it with. The victory will be achieved at a very high cost, because the victory will be measured in the lives of people, the people you read about in obituaries every day, said Mykolova. American physician Mike Corcoran, who provides prosthetics for Ukrainians as well, told Sky News that at least 25,000 Ukrainian soldiers have lost limbs since the beginning of the war. This is a stadium full of disabled people. The number is not official, and some of them are associated with multiple limb losses, he said. Sky News notes that during the 18 months of war in Ukraine, at least 10 times more soldiers underwent amputation of limbs than during the 20 years of American war in Iraq and Afghanistan. The publication also claims that during war, Ukrainians often apply a tourniquet too high from the wound and leave it for too long. As a result, the cells of the limb die, and the entire arm or leg has to be removed, and not just part of it. And this process is carried out in the most terrible conditions. Let me remind you earlier that the Wall Street Journal cited an even larger number of Ukrainians who lost one or more limbs. Between 20 and 50,000 Ukrainians have lost one or more limbs since the start of the war, the publication reported, noting that these figures are comparable to the First World War. The publication provides these data with reference to the Kyiv charitable organization Hoop Foundation and the German manufacturer of prosthetics Ottobock. The latter, in turn, rely on data from the Ukrainian leadership and partner companies. The article notes that the actual number of injured may be even higher, since the process of prosthetics takes a lot of time. The publication writes that at the beginning of the war, the main causes of amputations were artillery and rocket attacks. Now, military personnel are being injured by mines planted along the entire front line. At the same time, Zelensky does not know whether Ukraine will be able to make a major breakthrough at the front before the end of this year. In an interview with CNN, when asked if this was possible, the president replied, "I don't think anyone knows, really. But I think we will do better," he added, noting Ukraine's advance in the east. Probably referring to the liberation of the destroyed villages of Andriivka and Klishchiivka near Bakhmut. Meanwhile, the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine says that unknown saboteurs blew up 2 planes and a helicopter at the Chkalovsky airfield in the Moscow region. This happened on September 18th. Government aircraft, so-called doomsday planes and reconnaissance aircraft, are based at this airfield. The explosives planted substantially damaged the An-148 and Il-20 aircraft and the Mi-28N helicopter, which had previously been actively used to shoot down drones. It is reported that the damage to the aircraft will not allow them to be quickly restored. The tail section of the helicopter was damaged by the explosion. Another An-148, located nearby, received minor damage. I would like to note that a number of Russian Telegram channels reported that this airfield was completely cordoned off as a result of an emergency incident on September 18th. Friends, considering what is happening in my country, this channel is now my only source of income. If you are able to support me financially, I will be very grateful. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.